Good to see you. Loving the antler.
You've been publishing a load of books and traveling. How about this new series with Thames and Hudson about nature? So beautiful.
Yeah, it actually won an award recently. It's been going well. So I had spring come out this year, and then autumn in the autumn, and I've got summer coming out next year, and then winter coming out next year as well. I'm just finishing that off now. It's been a nice project with Gabby Dorney. She's an amazing writer. So it's nice to have a series out.
Amber Lee was actually sent in a question about that. She's like, how is it working on a series?
You have to keep it consistent, right? But I've not found that too difficult. I mean, Thames and Hudson have been quite prescriptive in what they want for their books. So that's really helped to keep everything consistent. I don't find it too hard to keep like a consistent style. I've got my own way of working that I feel quite comfortable with. And, I guess that comes with experience.
Is it different from when you're working on a fictional story?
Yeah, totally. Good. But also, like the way that the publisher works is different as well. So with the other books, I've been able to just make my own sketches and let my imagination run wild. And certainly with fictional stories, you can do anything, I mean, the Life book, for instance, that's a non-fiction poem. So that sort of falls in between because it's a non-fiction story. So in terms of evolution, all the animals had to be correct. It's got also anatomically, it all had to fit and be true. But then it's a poem, so it's quite an arty way of describing evolution. And so I did have some fun with like really interesting compositions and things that wouldn't necessarily happen in nature. So that one fell a bit in between. But then Wild Beings in Sail, you could just do anything, So it's nice to have that variation in books.
And even within the series, the Thames and Hudson series, you've got quite a lot of variety in those books.
There's like identifier pages in every single book. So that's like very much, draw the mushroom or draw the flower or draw the bird. And then there's poems, which are, there you can be a bit more creative.
Yeah.
So it's a lot in a little book, actually, the seasons books. They've done really well.
Yeah, really get the reader thinking. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of sensory activities.
It's really practical, and that's why it's a small format as well, so children can take it outside.
Go on an experience and an adventure with it. Really nice.
Yeah. For me, it was a real challenge because of the series. It's a lot of pages. I think it's 64 pages a book.
Wow.
And then the deadline is quite tight as well. So I've actually learned to draw really quick with this series. I've definitely had to pick up the pace, that's been good. Yeah.
What's been the kind of theme or learning thing of the year?
I think it's been hard to find a balance between those books and focusing on my own things as well, because it's been so intense, because the deadlines were quite tight. I was focused on that, and I had to, all my energy went into those books, but I still want to write my own stories as well and come up with my own ideas. And to find that balance when you're like fully in a project is really difficult. And I found, so you said I've been traveling, I took a break for 4 months, and that was really nice. I didn't immediately come up with new ideas, but just creating that space. Towards the end, I did start to come up with things, and not necessarily inspired by the traveling, but just to have that luxury again of thinking, what do I want to write about? Whereas like I was so like knee deep in these projects that it sort of took all my focus. And I think that's a nice thing with Inky Larks as well, is you get that space and time, and you have to create that, because otherwise it's just constantly go, 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 right? And it's really hard to do something meaningful and, alongside your actual bread and butter work. For instance, Mark Janssen, he's just gone to India. I'm not saying you necessarily have to go abroad to do that, but it's sometimes you just have to like get away, remove yourself from your day-to-day living. So you make that space for other things to come in and focus on your own projects. And if you can do that, I mean, you could try at home, but it's harder, isn't it, when you're surrounded with everything you have to do on a day-to-day basis.
When you're with other people, and in a new place, it just changes your perspective.
It's easier to break through those blocks, isn't it? And we've seen it in some of our retreats, or even to the point that people came with a story in mind, because you don't have to necessarily come with a dummy book or a story. You know, you might just have an idea in your head that you want to get started on, and they come and then they talk to everybody else, and then they decide to completely change their story, and they have another idea, you know, and that wouldn't have happened if you hadn't engaged with those other people. And I think that's where the magic happens with these retreats. You know, I've got my prepared talks every day that I want to talk about, but it's the sort of coming together and sharing that it becomes something bigger than the sum of its parts, right? And that's really where the magic happens. I find it magical.
We have that first day where we go around and we have this kind of beautiful introduction to Rome and getting to know everybody, and we have like dinner together, and by the time we get to the next day, when we really start like the workshops and the work in earnest, and we're like sharing our stories, everybody I think feels safer, and
but it's more comfortable, isn't it? Like, you're not strangers. Like, people connect so quickly, because even though like the characters might be different, you all have that creativity in common, right? And not everybody is professional, but you're all creative, and you connect over that, and everybody is seen and heard, and when somebody talks, other people listen, and then they have their own input, and you learn from that, and it happens organically. It sort of always somehow happens. And it's really beautiful.
To get to that point where you are accessing those deeper stories, those more meaningful projects that you want to bring forth, you need to feel comfortable. Otherwise, if you just like, you arrive someplace and they say, okay, what are you going to write? You'll just like, say the first thing, and the thing that maybe you think others will approve of.
Yeah, a lot of people think that, right? That whole, is it good enough, you know? And we've had people who you know, made stories for their grandchildren or made stories for their child, you know, and they just wanted to have a break, get away, do something valuable, come back with a story that they could give to their child. You know, no grand aspirations to get published or anything, you know, just making something for the fun of it.
Some of those are the most beautiful stories. Like, we've seen the photos of how these books then get shared with the family, and you know, that's as grand and as beautiful and as meaningful, maybe even more than publishing a book.
Nothing better. I think there's nothing better. And then you see the support that they get from the whole group, because we always make like a little WhatsApp group, don't we? And people comment on that, and it's usually like when we have to say goodbye after a few days. Like, you know, you meet as strangers, but you really part as friends. And there's tears quite often at the end, you know, because you really connect. And you spend such a beautiful, quite intimate time, right? Because you're sharing your thoughts and your feelings. And and then you go away, but it's not like goodbye. You know, people are still, even now, when did we go on the retreat? It was March, April. People are still talking to each other on the WhatsApp and supporting each other, and it's really lovely. Your space is the perfect space for that, because you can sit outside on the roof terrace and just find your own little corner where you can do your thing, or you could sit inside surrounded by all the books. It's cozy, you know. It's like this little hideaway in the center of Rome. So it's a really, really special place.
We have a lot of people who just want to learn how to do a picture book. It's their first time. Maybe they've been drawing or doing a bit of writing. They've fallen in love with children's books, but they're not quite sure how to go about that first book. But then we have authors and illustrators who've published a lot of books, and they want to refine that inspiration. Maybe they've been super stressed, or just, so as you were saying before, just, you know, deadline after deadline after deadline, and they just want to take some time to reconnect with their love for the craft and for picture books. And there's this whole range in between, and so
we've had mums coming with daughters, and daughters coming with mums, and
yeah.
And mom coming just to have her first breakaway from very young kids. Yeah, we've had a lawyer who's super creative. I mean, a whole range of people.
So what about for this year? What have we got planned? What can people expect?
We usually start off with just really nice Italian breakfast and coffee, usually in the sun, because so far the sun's always been shining. And then I do a talk based around different topics every day, different one. And they vary from something as abstract as inspiration, like where do you get it from, what to do when you get blocked, things like that, to, I mean, what's a good story structure, character build up, composition, how can text and image reinforce each other, and yeah, so every day there's like a different topic, and then generally people then retreat to their own little space, or they'll sit together at the table and start working on their own stories, and then you and I both individually look over those and give advice, and whenever there's a question, we're obviously on hand. I think I'll do another monoprinting session, because people really liked that last time. It was fun. It's something not a lot of people have done. So we go at sketching in the piazzas, because of course we are in Rome, so we've got to enjoy that too. And we'll make some sketches, and then we'll take those back to the studio and we'll print those off.
That was really lovely. It creates such interesting textures.
I use it a lot in my own books to add detail. Yeah, because I'm quite impatient. I mean, I'm patient, like I can draw for hours, right? But if it comes to a lot of detail, I start and then I get bored, and then it sort of doesn't look so great anymore. So I had to find a way to get detail, but in like a quick way, you know. I do like detail. I always find myself reverting to adding more stuff, because I want my drawings to be quite layered, that when somebody sees it for the 20th time, that they still maybe pick up something new. And monoprint gives me all these really interesting textures in a very quick way. And it's fun because you get your hands dirty again, you know, you're not behind the screen.
Yeah, messing around.
Yeah, and it's unpredictable, you know, it's good. It's
yes, good exactly.
Let go of that. Same with watercolor, it's quite unpredictable. It's quite a tricky one to get right, you know. But that unpredictability, that's where the play is, and that's where you get those more original looking compositions, because you can't replicate that on the screen, I find. You know, I see some amazing digital Procreate drawings as well, but I think you can't beat that handmade, playing around, seeing what happens, you know, and those happy accidents. Relaxing and letting go, right? I think that's when you create the best pieces. Usually it's not like the first mark you make, right? You have to get into it, and then it comes, right? You got to get yourself into that space. Yeah, it can be learned, you know. It's not just there straight away. You have to work at it, and again, that's practice, right? It reminds me of, actually, this morning I was thinking, my husband went horse riding once. This was before I met him. His ex-girlfriend had a horse, and he thought, like, well, as I'm at the stables anyway, I might as well keep better. And there was this horse called Apollo, and Apollo had been on box rest for a long time. So you can imagine, like, Apollo, massive horse, not been out for a while. And so my husband goes on in the riding stables. He picks Apollo into like a little trot, and he was like really ready to go, you know. But because of the lack of experience that my husband had at the time, he sort of started to tense up a bit, because it was unnerving, you know, to be on such a big horse going quite fast. And because he tensed up, of course, Apollo thought, oh, you want to go faster, you know. So he went faster, and then my husband tensed up even more, you know. And so before you knew it, this went on for a while, and before I knew it, he was like going around and like, well, not a gallop, but like a very fast canter, you know, around this riding school. And the instructor was like telling him, relax, you've got to relax, you know. And it's a bit like that with art, like you just have to let go and just go with it and relax, you know. And then you get into that flow state, right? And that's where you want to be, because that's where the good stuff gets made, you know. But you've got to relax. Right?
I think that sometimes creativity requires sort of what is it, the word in English? You know, like when like little gaps in the window where the air comes in.
Yes.
You know, when you get
A draft.
a draft, it requires
Yes.
drafts, because in the sense that if you have something too airtight, it's rigid, and you're not allowing for things like new things, special things, inspiration, change, happy accidents to happen. It needs a bit of drafts.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm in the
to
right
ways
house
of
then.
working that allow for that to happen, you know?
Yeah. That's very true. I like Elizabeth Gilbert's quote. She says, "A creative life is a life that's more strongly based on your curiosity than your fear." And the trick is to always be led by curiosity. But it is quite daunting. You think, oh, picture books are so lovely and fun, but when you've signed a contract with a big publisher and you're staring at that first white page, there is a little voice, and I hear this from even the most experienced illustrators who've published hundreds of books. There is that little voice that's like, "It's going to be okay. Am I going to pull it off again this time?" And I think that's really,
Have I still got it?
normal. Yeah, but you got to train yourself to put that in the bag and just get going, right?
Yeah. One of the people who came on the most recent retreat we had with Lizzie Stewart, she's published quite a few books, and she's a lovely illustrator. So she's, as you say, got a lot of experience, and she was saying that for her, this is something not so much about confidence, but about letting things move around freely. She was saying she doesn't take notes on a notebook that has lines. If you're thinking like, okay, this has to make sense in chronological order, like if you're thinking of a story, and if you've got lines and you're going like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, your idea might not be ready for that. You might not have it all like super organized in your head yet. And so she was saying about using a notebook without lines, and she sort of writes higgledy-piggledy all around the page, like a sort of a spidergram, or just like a drawing here and there, and then arrows. And I think that's maybe where your brain is at that moment, in that first creative stage.
I think it's different for everybody, and everybody has their own way of writing. And I know for some people, they get the images first and then they write something to go with it. It really depends on what works for you. But again, like, that's something we can look at and develop too, because I find that really interesting. But everybody works differently, and it depends on your character. I'm generally very organized, very structured, but I've never written a story with bullet points going, this is going to be my beginning, middle, and end, and then I'll like connect the dots. Like, no, it doesn't. For me, it happens very organically, and I don't even sit down and go, right, I'm going to write now, and it's going to be about this and that, and or do a whole brain dump either. I have the ideas in my head. Like, even now, they're in the back of my head. I've got stuff that I want to write about. I just don't quite know how. And it's almost a bit like, for me, it's like making a coffee. Like, I have to put the coffee in. Like, I know like the grounds and the beans and where they should be from, right? And then I put the water on, and then it just needs to percolate, for a while. And that's generally happening in my brain, and then it sort of solidifies. I like press it down, I take it out, and it goes quite quick then. But that process could be months, right? For me, that's how it works. And then I write that first draft down generally really quickly.
Wow.
I'm talking minutes, and that makes it sound easy, but it's been months of thinking about it, right?
Yes.
And then sometimes it will just hit me, like literally from seemingly out of nowhere, but it's not, because it's been there all along, right? It just had to sort of crystallize, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
So I like Wild Beings, Sail. I've got it's not even, I've got literally a scrap of paper, because I literally just quickly grab whatever's lying like on the hand and get a pen, and it's really like the handwriting is terrible. It's just and then it's there, and then of course there's lots of drafts and tweaking, but it goes quite quick then. That's how I work.
I find walking is quite good, and when I go and pick up my son from school, the stories at the back of my mind, and as I'm walking, I'll just record an idea or something. I was thinking about that. Dickens used to walk like kilometers and kilometers every day, and I thought, oh, maybe that's how he worked on his writing, because he used to walk so much, like out into the countryside from central London. Well, I guess London was smaller at the time. Yeah.
Do whatever works for you, I would say.
Yeah.
Nobody is judging. Like, you're all
Nobody's,
struggling with the same things, all in your own level, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
And even I remember last time at the retreat, I read out a sonnet by Michelangelo when he was painting the Sistine Chapel, and there's actually there's a documentary at the moment on the BBC about him. It's really interesting, and they actually talk about him painting the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. I mean, the struggle, and I thought, like, gosh, it was the same for him. Like, one of the best artists in the world, he was struggling through it. It was awful, And he wrote this sonnet to a friend, and he said, I can't remember what his friend's name was. I think it was something like Giovanni or something. And he said, Giovanni, save me. I am not a painter. And you go, wow, like, this is somebody who arguably created one of the most beautiful artworks in the entire world. And it was a struggle. He saw himself as a sculptor. He's like, I'm not a painter, And you go, well, you pulled it up really nicely, It's not bad. It's in perspective a bit, doesn't it? But I think we all have that little voice in the back of our head, no matter how established we are in the field, and that's fine. I think that also pushes you to do better, but you can't let it cripple you. At the end of the day, it's a lovely industry, and with lovely people, and what a privilege, really, to do that. So go and enjoy it. And in the end, we share our stories, and also get feedback from each other, and how, like, what are the next steps, when you leave, so you go back and know what you have to do after that. And I think even just finishing your dummy book is a massive accomplishment,
Yeah, because then once you've got that, you can go back home and do some, 2-3 pieces of final artwork. Then you're pretty much ready to send the dummy book to a potential agent or a publisher.
Yeah, I'll talk about that too for people who are not that experienced or don't know how to go about that, whether you should have an agent or shouldn't have an agent, what are the pros and cons, what's it like to work with different publishers in different countries. And so there's some practical advice too in that sense. Yeah.
I think because we help each other all along the way, which I think is really special. It's not just like one-off or an online course which is pre-recorded, which maybe gives you a lot of information, but each book is different. And so you might be like, oh, I'm getting all this information about picture books in general, but what about my book? I'm not sure how to do this. I'm not sure how to do that. Is that good enough? How could I do it better? So you are there basically the whole time, those 6 days, supporting the students in getting their book to the best place possible. It's really detailed, personalized feedback.
And so are you, and so are the other people. They also help along, because when you read your story, especially when you read it out loud, you can see what works and what doesn't work. And sometimes somebody goes like, oh, I didn't quite get that bit, because, whereas like in your head it makes sense. Great thing.
You can learn so much from each other and from people from all different levels of experience and like other fields, and it's not just the tutors and the people who've published who can help you and give you new ideas. It's also empowering. Everybody by the end of it has learned things, but also has felt, oh, I contributed too. I was able to give some insights or help. Everybody has knowledge and experience that is valuable.
It's such a group effort, and we all come with our own stories. And I always say, like, if you don't have a story to tell, then you haven't lived, right? Like, everybody's got a story to tell. We all have something that's worth sharing, and everybody wants to hear it,
That's a wonderful thing. It almost goes back to those sort of oral storytelling times, because we do make the physical books, we write them and illustrate them, but a lot of the time we're also telling the stories out loud, like they used to, like around the fireplace, and we're around the table having with our mugs of cappuccino or tea, and there is also that dimension of oral storytelling and having a little audience, a cozy group where you can tell the story and get those reactions.
That connection is something that we need more than ever now. People
Yes.
really, there's something so special about that. And even though like we're quite, I think generally introvert as a, you know, illustrators, authors generally are quite introvert. They don't sort of go and seek out big crowds or massive parties, and but you still need that connection and talk to people and
Yeah.
on a deeper level, you know, and that's what I really like about it. It's not just chit chat, you know, it quite quickly moves on from that.
Yes.
It's really nice. And your mom makes a really nice meal on top of that, so you know.
Yes, food, lots of delicious food.
So, you know, like what
Yes.
else do you want, really? No, it's really special, and I can't wait to come back again.
I can't wait. And we have it immediately after Bologna. So come to Bologna, go to the fair, and then join us. It's only a train ride away. So it'll be really
Exactly. I'll be going to Bologna, and and then just hop on the train. It's really easy. And that's the other thing. Some people feel a bit daunted by like traveling by themselves. But again, like I think that's such a great thing to do then, you know. It's all about giving yourself those experiences, and it's all, you know, you're doing it for your own growth and development, and I think that's the same with traveling by yourself. Like some people find that quite a big thing, you know, but it's such an easy country to travel to and travel around in, you know. And in Rome, I mean, you know, we've all made memories that we're going to look back on for the rest of our lives, you know.
Yeah,
And that's what it's
absolutely.
about too. And I'll see you in a few months in Rome.
Yes,
All
yes.
right.
Ciao,
A
darling.
presto. Ciao.